A bomb shatters New Year celebrations outside a Coptic church in Egypt within hours. Christian crowds were on the streets, attacking mosques and clashing with police. Who's out to hurt the Copts? What is the Egyptian government doing to protect them? Is it trying to bridge the Christian-Muslim divide, or perhaps encourage it? This is Inside Story. Hello, good to have your company. David Foster with you here on Inside Story. 2010 was a tense year for Coptic Christians in Egypt, one which ended in the violence you've just seen. The country's president, Hosni Mubarak's asking for calm, calling on Egyptians to unite after Saturday's bombing in the city of Alexandria. Ayman Mohyeddin is following developments from Cairo.
A community in shock and mourning. Coptic Christians gather outside the Saints' Church in Alexandria hours after one of the bloodiest attacks on their community in Egypt's history. Authorities say a suicide bomber detonated his explosives at a New Year's Eve prayer service. Their prayers for peace shattered just minutes into the new year. At a hospital next to the church where dozens of injured were taken, one man described the horror.
As the car exploded, I was with my brother and a friend. I did not feel anything after that. I carried my brother and put him on the sidewalk. Then there was a second explosion. Someone came and carried us and brought us to this hospital.
Egyptian police continue to sift through the evidence at the scene for clues as to who was behind the explosion.
I tell the terrorists, we won our battle against terror during the 90s. And you're making a big mistake if you think you can get away without punishment.
Officials were quick to point the finger at foreign elements like Al-Qaeda, which has threatened to carry out acts of violence on Egypt's Christian minority. Recently, the government had taken steps to increase security at churches, but proving not to be enough on this night.
The explosions targeted Christians because they are the weak part of Egypt. They think that they can use this to fragment Egyptian society and cause a strong impact.
After the bombing, Copts and Muslims clashed at the scene, while the country's senior religious and political figures called for calm and unity. The Coptic Church has described this as an unprecedented attack and is calling on the Egyptian government to act firmly to ensure the protection and the freedom of worship of its Coptic citizens. Ayman Mohyeddin, Al Jazeera, Cairo.
Other attacks in the last 12 months have raised tensions. Last January, a drive-by shooting left 6 Coptic Christians and 1 Muslim dead. It's thought to have been a revenge attack for the alleged rape of a 12-year-old Muslim girl by a Christian man. In November, fights broke out in Cairo between Coptic protesters and police. That was after Christians were refused permission to build a church. 1 person died in that attack. Well, join us to discuss the issue. Our guests in Cairo, Jazeera Patras, a member of the Policies Committee of the ruling National Democratic Party and a political science professor, a Copt who will be defending the government's position. Also in Cairo, Dr. William Wissa, a writer and human rights activist, himself a Copt. And in London, Dalia Brahimi, Dr. Brahimi, a research fellow in global security at the London School of Economics. Welcome to Inside Story, all of you. If I could start with you, first of all, Dr. Wissa, why do you think the Copts believe they've become a target?
The Copts believe that become a target because since few decades, they are targeted, they are assassinated, there is a harassment, there is a kind of discrimination against them in all fields of civil society inside Egypt. Perhaps you heard about Al-Kosh massacre in January the 2nd, 2000, when the 21 Christians have been killed. The killers are known in the area, and there was no.
But my question, with due respect, Doctor, my question is not have they become targets, but why have they become targets? Why do the Copts feel they're in the firing line quite literally as well?
Because there is an atmosphere to try to finish with the Christian existence in the whole Middle East, not Egypt only. we feel that the integrists, the jihadists, don't want any Christian presence neither in Egypt, nor in Iraq, nor anywhere else in the area.
Well, let's bring in
targeting the people.
Professor Patras, speaking, if you don't mind me saying so, sir, on behalf of the government, because that's why we've invited you on the programme, but fair to point out, right to point out that you are a Copt yourself. Is that your take on the situation, that there is a general hatred of Christians in the Middle East, and this is just part of a bigger picture we're seeing here?
We would see too many frictions between Muslims and Christians over the last 3 decades in Egypt. This is new to the Egyptian society. We are the Egyptian society, Egyptian community. We are a minority in Egypt. However, in 2007, there were several amendments in the constitution to provide right for citizenship. Citizenship meaning that I have all the rights as equivalent to any other Egyptian, regardless of the religion, of the gender, of anything else.
But doesn't that say it all, that it took until 2007 for this to even sort of make it into the constitutional amendments, that these people, the Copts, yourself included, were regarded as second-class, if not third-class citizens for so many decades before that?
I wouldn't say this. As a Coptic Christian and Egyptian in the first place, I would say there were so many frictions. We did not have too many rights as regard to licenses for churches, not too many key positions in the government. However, this was not a policy to see Egyptian Christians as second or third class. I wouldn't say this.
Okay,
I would say there were social and faction problems between Muslims and Christians, but not the policy of the government.
OK, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Let's take a look at some of the grievances for the Copts, who make up 10% of Egypt's population. And the elections in November left them with less than 1% of the seats in the country's parliament. The Christians claim there's institutional discrimination and they're denied high-ranking jobs, at least many of them do. They have about 2% of all the houses of worship, 2,000 churches, compared to 93,000 mosques. This is for 10% of the population. And building or repairing churches requires security clearances and special government permits. Mosques require neither. Egypt does say it's considering changing this policy by making all houses of worship equal in the eyes of the law. Let's go to London, talk to Dr. Dalia Brahimi, going to give us an overview on who might be behind this attack in Alexandria and indeed some of the others there. The government making it plain that it blames foreign forces. Is that fair, or is it just a rather convenient way of saying this is a security issue and not a social issue?
Well, I think in this case, as is often the case, the security and the social issues are actually fairly intertwined. I think that given the sophistication of the attack and the threats that we've been hearing made explicitly by al-Qaeda in Iraq, there is a chance, a high chance, that there was some involvement of al-Qaeda in Iraq in these attacks. But as has been pointed out by the previous guests and by your introductory segment, there is a very important enabling environment in Egypt at the moment, which is this sort of problem with social cohesion and rising sectarian tensions.
Well, you mean
so
it's the country's so fragmented at the moment that there's such discrimination that these sort of things are inevitable?
Not inevitable, but made much more likely than they would be were social relations much calmer. And I think that there's been an ongoing dynamic between Egypt and Iraq on this Muslim-Christian sectarian issue. In the attacks in Iraq, carried out by the Islamic State of Iraq, an al-Qaeda affiliate, were actually enacted explicitly in revenge for alleged abduction of Christian converts to Islam in Egypt. So there is a dynamic, and there's been a lot of chatter on the internet over the last couple of months especially about taking revenge for the abduction of this girl and another girl. And it seemed very possible that this would happen. And the fact that it's in Egypt is not a coincidence. There are fundamental problems, I would say, and it is very much an enabling environment.
Yeah, well, we have to point out that the story to which you refer is at the moment unsubstantiated. It's nothing more than a rumour that these two women have been taken
Absolutely.
away. Professor Patras, let me go back to something that was included in Ayman Mohyeddin's story there. A Coptic lawyer saying Christians are being targeted to fragment Egyptian society. Has it happened?
Well, sectorial violence was apparent in the last, as I said, in the last 3 decades in Egypt. And I would assure you that this is the act and fingerprint of Qaeda to separate or divide or provoke violence in the Egyptian society. They depend on this incident, sad incident, catastrophic incident, to provoke Muslims against Christians and vice versa. So I would believe that this is a strategic goal for Al-Qaeda, not only targeting Christians and churches, but also provoking sectorial violence. And as I said, this is a fertile land for a sectorial violence in Egypt due to the tension between the two sectors in the society.
But has it not been a failure of the government to prevent the two sectors ending up sort of on completely opposite sides? Would it not have been a much more sensible approach to make the Copts far more included in Egyptian society far earlier?
Well, the government had many efforts to stabilize the society or stabilize the situation or to calm down the two sides through the Azhar and the church, the Pope of Alexandria, our Pope. So the idea is that they are trying to reduce the violence through the diplomatic channels, through the religious channels, but I would say this is more deeply rooted in the society between the communities rather than, a few diplomatic words to calm down the situation.
Can I just ask Dr. Wissa to respond to that overtures the professor's saying are being made to the Coptic community, that there are attempts to diffuse the tensions that appear to exist. Is that your view of it?
No, it is not my opinion, but let me, before answering your question, say that I don't agree with the terms frictions. What we are living now, we should use the appropriate term. We should use aggressor and victims. There is no, when we use frictions, this is the term used by Egyptian media and by the Egyptian government. If we should try to find a solution, we should use the appropriate term. There is aggression, there is victims, and I think that the Egyptian government has failed to settle the Christian minorities problems inside Egypt. So if you see there is a real problem for building churches, we are suffering from this. We should have a permission from the president himself. My brother, Muslim brother, when they want to build a mosque, they build the mosque and then they inform the authorities that they built a mosque. But for me, I should have a permission from the president to pray. This is discrimination.
Let me ask Professor Patras about that. Why has that been the case for so long? I know the laws may be about to be relaxed, but why has it been possible to build a mosque anywhere, anytime, no permission, and a church it's almost impossible? Why?
I would say this is unfair condition, and the real reason for this, because the government also fears the reaction of the Muslim majority. When they see churches, they become so frustrated. So friction will occur. There will be violence. So they try to reduce the number of churches, which is, again, I'm stating it clearly and bluntly, this is unfair condition. That's why the government has been studying for the last 3 years, proposing acts for the Egyptian parliament
to pass a law. But why has it taken until just 3 years ago?
Unified law for...
Why has it taken so long?
It was late, let me admit.
But they didn't take any action. They didn't. This project for the unified law for the worship buildings, does exist since 5 years, and this government didn't take any action. It is just letting people speaking about this all of this time, but I think that they will not issue a unified law for the worship buildings, because there is no laws now to build mosques. They wouldn't dare to take this action. They will find a revolution in the Muslim streets. So I think they will not issue a unified law for worship buildings.
Let me bring in
this
Dr.
is a joke
Brahimi.
From Egyptian. This is a joke from Egyptian government.
I'm going to bring in Dr. Brahimi in London for Centre for Global Governance at the London School of Economics. Taking a look at the big picture, Doctor, Egypt's security forces, internal security forces, now number more than their army. Why have they been unable to prevent the violence against the Copts with this number of people on the streets?
Well, I think that there seems to be, at the very least, a lack of strategy, definitely, and maybe even, as we may have seen just now in this program, a lack of a willingness to confront the fact that there is a pervasive problem, and that this problem is on a societal level. And I think that the problem with Egypt's confrontation with Islamism, radical Islamism and political Islam, is that it tends to be, and it has tended to be throughout the 90s and until now, one of almost denial. And one of the big questions the regime should be asking itself is not only about the issue of the lack of social cohesion between Muslims and Christians, but also about the management of its relationship with political Islam, and the fact that there is no possibility for there to be organized Islamist opposition in Egypt. The Muslim Brothers were preventing from running in the recent elections, and it was largely seen as a bit of a whitewash. And I think that the problem with Islamism in Egypt is that it goes very much underground, and it manifests itself in this, it further radicalizes while it's underground, and it manifests itself in this sort of violence.
So when you hear the President, Hosni Mubarak, saying, we won the battle against terror in the 1990s, and you see these attacks in 2011. What do you think he's talking about?
Yeah, I think that when he said that, what occurred to me was the fact that we mustn't make the same mistakes we made in the 1990s, which is to treat Islamist opposition, legitimate Islamist opposition that's willing to contest power peacefully, with an iron fist. And I think that there's the danger of repeating that, which was actually, sometimes a source of the problem in Egypt. But also, I think what you found throughout the region is that political Islam was essentially crushed in the 1990s. And what it sort of mutated now, so that Islamism is actually expressed on a societal level. So there's no longer this desire to seize the reins of the state and to topple the regimes, but rather to slowly and creepingly Islamize society. And I think that that is actually what is happening all over the region, and it's happening in Egypt. And when you have that kind of dynamic, you have certain very intolerant strains of Islam bandied around, it contributes to sectarian tension, and that creates an enabling environment for attacks, as we saw this morning.
Let me go to Dr. Wissa in Cairo right now. When you heard Professor Patras saying that he believed that there was the possibility of violence on the streets if the Muslims there saw more churches being built, what did you as a Coptic Christian think about that?
Yes, it made me frustrated, because it means that the government is weak in front of these Islamic groups. So the Egyptian regime bowed in front these groups. He is afraid from the Islamic street in Egypt. That's why he didn't take any action to settle the Christian problem for not being accused to be pro-Christian or something like this. So I don't find, you will be astonished, I don't find any difference between the President Mubarak regime and the Muslim Brotherhood. They are fighting only, he is fighting only the jihadist branch, but he let the theological branches Islamizing the Egyptian society. They changed the education in Egypt. That's why we find many youth now that are fanatic. They don't know anything about the other with a big A, so with a capital A. So I am not optimistic about the future inside Egypt.
Give me the top 3 complaints you, as a Coptic Christian community, have that you would like to see addressed by the Egyptian government. 1, 2, and 3. What are they?
The first one is to have the right to build the church inside Egypt, to exercise the right of worship. This is a basic right for Egyptian for human rights. The second thing, the personal status other than Sharia status, which is being applied now for the Christian in the question of marriage and divorce. The Pope Shenouda III and the other churches inside Egypt have presented a unified law since 30 years, and they renewed it lately, but there is no action from this government.
Okay, let me ask Professor Patras. It's been said that we saw Hosni Mubarak today saying he's appealing for calm. We beat the terrorists in the 1990s. But he's saying it far too late, because over the course of the last 20, 30 years, with all these attacks on Coptic Christians, he's pretty much kept quiet.
Well, I would say that Egypt, against what was said earlier, that Egypt was so successful in curbing down the violent attacks and terrorist attacks in the 1990s.
Yeah, but why has he left it till now to speak out?
Yes, I would say because this is, again, not Egyptian from the Egyptian society. This is a foreign attack from Al-Qaeda. It has the fingerprint of Qaeda, car bombs, and the style and magnitude of the attack is classically Al-Qaeda attack. That's one thing. Another thing,
I want to go on that line to Dr. Brahimi to sort of sum up the argument here about whether, in fact, it was something that the Egyptians could not prevent because it came from outside, or it was something that came from outside because within Egypt it was fertile ground for such a thing.
Yeah, I would lay emphasis on the latter, that there's a dynamic between the local grievances within Egypt and the fact that it's seen by actors that may be based abroad, possibly in Iraq, as a situation that's ripe for exploitation. And that in terms of preventing this, there has to be a much longer term approach, because the problem, as has been indicated throughout this segment, is that the roots of this have been, the seeds have been sown over a long period of time, and it's going to be very difficult to undo. But there needs to be some sort of strategy by the government, which needs to be seen as an honest broker by the Coptic community. And even if this attack wasn't conducted by a local Egyptian who has a sectarian problem with the Copts, the fact is that it will ignite sectarian feelings, and there needs to be some sort of strategy about how to deal with this issue honestly.
Well, with you saying that, Dr. Brahimi, it does seem inappropriate for me to say thank you on such a gloomy note, but we do appreciate you joining us. There's Dr. Dalia Brahimi from the LSE. Also, thanks to Dr. William Wissa, human rights activist and Coptic Christian in Cairo, and also Professor Maged Reda Patras, a member of the Policies Committee for the ruling NDP himself, also a Coptic Christian. To you three, thank you very much indeed, and to you watching, thank you very much for your company on this Inside Story. I'll see you next time.